How did INEOS arrive at the decision to keep Erik Ten Hag? Why did the season review by Wilcox, Brailsford and Blanc take so long? Did Brailsford really save Ten Hag from being sacked? What managers did INEOS actually speak to and when? And why did INEOS change their mind after deciding to sack Erik Ten Hag after the Crystal Palace game to then keeping him as United's manager? Let's take a look inside INEOS's decision to keep Erik Ten Hag to find out exactly what went on throughout this entire process. This video, ladies and gents, is going to be absolutely info-packed. I'm going to run through an article from The Athletic, from Laurie Whitwell and Adam Crafton on Erik Ten Hag and the process of what happened, the timeline of what happened, and also this article here from James Ducker with a little bit more information. All right, I'm going to sort of try and summarize it all for you. You can let me know what you think. Leave your comments, and also I'm going to leave the links to the full articles on The Athletic and The Telegraph because I'm not going to run through all of them because there's so much info in them. All right, I've just picked out the key points. Let's dive straight into it. We're starting here. The consensus from INEOS at the start with Erik Ten Hag was that he was going to be kept. All right, now that's sort of shifted, as you can see. He was left out of certain transfer meetings after Chelsea about the future of Varane, about maybe something to do with targets as well. But INEOS, I've written it down as a rift there. That might be a slightly extreme description. But INEOS were considering and looking and planning without Erik Ten Hag at that time. And we began that data-driven search around a new manager, infinite Manchester United manager. We also did a search, and that's how we found Erik Ten Hag. But it's the fact that data's being more involved in it. And we're looking at two different types of managers. One that's young and up and coming and maybe overperforming given their resources, like Kieran McKenna, or somebody who's extremely experienced and has managed a big club before, like Thomas Tuchel. They're the two ends of the spectrum. And probably why, in my mind, they were the two managers I thought you could have had a conversation about. That's why I've maintained this whole way through. But that was the start of it. And you can see that the INEOS opinion on Erik Ten Hag certainly shifts a few directions throughout this entire process. Conversations there around tension over power of the role, Ten Hag wanted more involvement in the medical side of things, and still, of course, wanted his involvement in the transfer side of things, but that wasn't a conversation. But it's that part there that I find interesting. INEOS wanted Carrington to have more energy, and the idea of replacing Van der Gag was floated, rather than changing Ten Hag himself. And I'll be honest, I think we're going to hear about this again in the future. I'll be interested to see when the new contract is written out for Erik Ten Hag, and if INEOS still feel that more energy is needed, maybe a different environment is needed at Carrington, and that maybe a new coach could be brought in, maybe Van der Gag. I don't think Van der Gag will leave. I don't think Erik Ten Hag would let him leave. I think he's very loyal to him, and I think they're loyal to each other. But that's going to be one to watch for sure, to see whether or not this Van der Gag conversation comes up again. But then we move on to this, and we move on to a real timeline of events, right? After Man United lost to Crystal Palace, INEOS considered sacking him before the Arsenal game and bringing in an interim, all right? So Ten Hag certainly came close to being sacked. And probably this point was the closest it came, all right? Of course, United then lost to Arsenal. And after that, Brailsford, Blanc and Wilcox all met in Monaco. Barada and Ashworth were kept in the loop, and they decided that Ten Hag should be sacked. And Joel Glazer being involved there, I hope that's more just, I doubt he was there physically, but I imagine it's just him being informed more than anything else. That's what I think so anyway. I've written down there that finances were always considered a significant factor in sacking Erik Ten Hag, and there's going to be some people that really do feel that that probably was a major factor overall in whether Erik Ten Hag was sacked. And truth be told, the Glazers have ruined our finances, and INEOS have got some job on their hands in getting their heads around all of that. So it would have been a factor involved. I don't think it would have been the driver of the decision, but it may well have caused part of the delay, for sure. Now we move on to the week before the FA Cup final, right? And this is where all the names come out of the hat. De Zerbi was sounded out. United met with McKenna. United met with Marco Silva on the Thursday before the FA Cup final. And United met with Thomas Frank on the Friday. Met with Poch, met with Tuchel. So as much as Chelsea sacking Poch may have forced United's hand a little bit with McKenna, it basically, United reacted and INEOS reacted by speaking to everyone. A long list of names there. De Zerbi, McKenna, Silva, Frank, Poch and Tuchel. 6 different managers, Lots of meetings. Amorim never really involved in the conversations. Roberto Martinez's name being linked early on. Bit of a random one. But Brailsford denied that Erik Ten Hag was going to be sacked. And I suppose this is why the Jacob Steinberg article came out, because he got wind of this from the opposite side, from the Chelsea side, because United interviewed so many managers. But INEOS really, following on from the first point there about from Infinite Mum, looking at Manchester United managers and data-wise, they spoke with 6 managers before the FA Cup final. Now, that really should tell you that they didn't have 100% faith in Erik Ten Hag, because they absolutely didn't. All right, now moving on to the FA Cup final and the consequence of that. I thought this little line here was quite an interesting one. People in the director's box reported a few anxious expressions. Those watching on sensed the pressure on the call over Erik Ten Hag had just become bigger because United won. Of course, United did win. Erik Ten Hag wasn't involved in the end of season review, which I don't really think is too much of a surprise. I know in some roles you might speak to your replacement or whatever it is, but I'm not surprised Erik Ten Hag wasn't involved in that. But of course, the opinion wasn't fixed. At that point, it still wasn't definite that Erik Ten Hag would keep his job. And that's where the further meetings happened, all right? Man United met again with Poch, and Man United met again with Tuchel. And it seems like, from everything that's been reported, Thomas Tuchel was the closest that Manchester United got to replacing Erik Ten Hag. Multiple meetings happened. I think he even suggested signing a Rudiger from Real Madrid. But United at that point decided that Tuchel wasn't the right path that they wanted to go down. And then we got the reports coming out that Tuchel had decided to have a year off and all that jazz. But ultimately, it ended with INEOS sticking with Erik Ten Hag. So the timeline of events really is coming into spring, Manchester United, we're keeping Erik Ten Hag. As the results got worse, Ten Hag was starting to get left out of certain meetings. Man United might have been planning without him. After Crystal Palace, United were considering sacking him. They kept him on. Opinion didn't really change in the build-up to the FA Cup final. They interviewed everybody. And after this whole process, they kept Erik Ten Hag. And to follow on from that, I'm going to go and read through. There's only one thing I really want to pull out here from the Telegraph's article. Actually, there's 2 things. Firstly, it's the idea of player rows is to do with Luke Shaw asking for permission to do some of his rehabilitation abroad. Man United said no. He then got a setback, and United then said yes. So basically, Luke Shaw was pretty much fair enough to actually ask to do some of his rehab abroad, because the medical staff at United certainly weren't doing it properly. So that's what the player rows are about. But going back to this, and I think this is the overall feeling that we're all getting, and it's correct, right? For all the conversations and with potential successors, it was clear United did not feel there was an outstanding candidate out there to replace Ten Hag, or at least one who was readily available to them. So that might be another indicator there that finances were certainly part of it, because United could have gone out and got most managers in the world, but you're going to have to pay 10, 20, 30 million to get them out of their jobs. I definitely think it was part of it, but I don't think it's the defining reason. But ultimately, we're now at a point where Erik Ten Hag is in talks over a new contract, and this is INEOS's way of repairing any sort of damaged relationship that may have come over the last 2-3 weeks, over the fact that INEOS met with Tuchel on more than one occasion, met with Poch, met with De Zerbi, met with McKenna, met with Thomas Frank, met with Marco Silva. Of course, that's going to make Erik Ten Hag question whether INEOS trust him and whether he should trust INEOS. And that's what that new contract is there to sort of say, right, this will happen before. And I think INEOS had fair ground to look at other options. Then they decided that they want to keep Erik Ten Hag. So you give him a new contract and you build that trust again. But in terms of the whole process, as I said, there's a fantastic article here from The Athletic. I encourage you to go and read it. There is so much more detail in there that I haven't mentioned yet. But INEOS decided to sack him, then backed away from it. Then decided again, this is still the right choice. Then backed away from it. Then the FA Cup final happened, and they really took their time. And despite meeting 6 managers, they decided that Erik Ten Hag was the right man. And maybe finances played a part of that. That's pretty much the whole process. And I think at this point we can sort of close the book on it and move on. And we can now speak about transfers. We can now speak about next season. And we can speak about the new contract for Erik Ten Hag. Because INEOS have made their mind up. And it does feel that whether it's politics inside the club, whether it's to do with finances, whether it's to do with the lack of a solid alternative, opinions definitely changed on Erik Ten Hag quite a few times. And it's a big reason why this whole process has been quite confusing to watch as a United fan.